Zoo workers of Reddit, which animal is the biggest jerk in your facility? Cassowary. If anyone need to enter their enclosure, they had to be two others in riot gear. Nothing makes you crap yourself more than scrambling behind them and hear the karate kick of the god smashing a shield behind you. I'm 100% certain velociraptors still exist and they just pretend to be these buttholes when they lose their teeth. Aldabra tortoises. They have an outdoor pen, but obviously they are stuck in a smaller indoor enclosure during the colder months. They won't leave you the frick alone. I was watering the plants at one point when two big males came up behind me and pinned me to the wall. I pinwheeled my arms and fell onto one's back. Sort of got to ride him. Other times, they decide to sit right in front of the door, so you're stuck until you convince them to move. You certainly aren't going to move 500 pounds of turtle on your own. If you put a squeegee against the wall, they simply have to knock it over and sit on it. Got the hose out? Yup. Go to sit on it. Bringing out food? Sit right in the fricking feed troughs. Grew up in St. Louis and went to the zoo a lot when I was a kid. Once I watched 3 jerky kids throwing stuff at a hippo. I was furious but just stood there because I didn't want to get beat up, and I swear to god that hippo turned slowly, backed up as close as possible to the moat, and then targeted those kids with a spray of hippo diarrhea crap that was truly unbelievable in volume and accuracy. Not a facility I work at currently, but we had a kookaburra who would catch lizards, snakes, frogs, and even earthworms so he could feed them to you. You would be standing around doing your job and all of a sudden he shows up on your shoulder trying to force feed you a lizard he whacked on the ground 30 times. Oh, by the way, if you covered your mouth, why not try the ear? The ear is a great place to put a dead lizard or live earthworm. I wasn't there at the time that this has happened, but I used to volunteer at the Omaha Zoo, and there was the story of Fu Manchu, the orangutan. Apparently, one of the keepers found Fu and some of his buddies hanging out outside of their enclosure and ushered them back in. When it happened again, the keeper thought someone was leaving the enclosure open. It happened so much that someone was about to get fired over it. Finally, someone witnessed Fu climbing through an air vent to get to the door, pulling it open enough to expose a gap, then pulling a piece of wire from his mouth and using the wire to undo the latch and open the door. He'd been hiding the wire in between his gums and lips to engineer his escape. Only a dong moved because he almost got people fired. Otherwise, it was slick as heck. I'm sure there are probably problem animals in the other areas of my zoo as well, but the animal that is the biggest jerk that I have worked with takes the form of a baby camel. Now, most people don't think about camels as dangerous animals usually, but a quick Google search will show you plenty of videos displaying just how strong and terrifying they can be. Fortunately, that's not an issue for us. All of our camels are well trained and pretty well behaved so long as you don't leave anything sitting around them that you aren't prepared to have eaten by one of the giant lugs. Except for one. This baby camel was orphaned by her mother, so she has been raised by us for the most part. Usually she is pretty sweet and fairly easy to get along with, but I have never seen an animal go through bigger mood swings than her. One moment she will be rubbing up next to you looking for attention, but the next moment you have your back turned she will be half reared up and ready to kick. And then after failing to murder you, she will try to come back to you for more affection like none of it ever happened. She would use any reason as an excuse to try and attack one of us too. Oh, that stick that has been in my enclosure for a week and I have never reacted to? Now that you are in my enclosure as well, it's now clearly an attacker and I need to destroy everything in my immediate radius. Now I know what you're thinking. It's just a baby, right? What harm could she do? Well, by 6 months she was already past 200 pounds and still growing. She'll easily pass 1,000 pounds when she is fully grown. So trying to let her outside in the morning when she was in a homicidal mood was a hassle to say the least. Dodging kicks and trying to hold onto her lead while she did her best to murder you. I would easily say 90% of the injuries sustained on the job in our department was due to her. That being said, I still love the little antichrist and she has definitely started to calm down with age and take to her training a lot better, but that couldn't have come fast enough for most of our shins and ankles. I interned my senior year of undergrad at a zoo and loved it. Wish I had stuck with it. Here are animals I worked with. Snow leopards. Mom and dad were big jerks, wouldn't actively attack or anything, but did not want any interaction with us. We had a cub born the day before I started, so I got to help raise this little butthole. We tried to be as hands-on as possible when we weighed her every week, but that little cub was mean. I have scars from her, but it's a pretty cool story to say you have scars from a snow leopard. Papa leopard almost knocked me out once. I got close to the fence to look for him. The fence was kind of those loose chain link mesh steel, so it moved if you leaned on it. I went to look for him because we were trying to shift him inside for the evening. I lean on the fence and he comes out of nowhere and pounces on the fence right above my head, then trots inside. I don't think he was trying to eat me, just knocked me on my ass. Hanuman langurs, buttholes. We had a mom and daughter and they hated anything that was male, which I happened to be. I cleaned up their poo and fed them, but they still hissed and yelled at me. Francois Langer. This little guy was way cooler than his roommates. He had a fur hawk and knew where treats were kept in my pockets. He would give you a pat down if you came by to visit. Red pandas. Sweetest little things. They're basically slow and clumsy raccoons. They'd do anything for a grape or biscuit. Cougars, my favorite by far. These were the two cuddliest giants I've ever seen. One was like 100 pounds. The other had a weight problem and was easily 200 pounds. The smaller was a female and I would have felt very comfortable if there was ever a reason I would be locked in her cage alone. The big guy was very sweet as well, but I feel like instinct may kick in with him. They both loved scratches on their head and cheeks and would purr. They were humongous house cats. I used to volunteer at a zoo and the biggest jerks were the ravens. They were really smart and awesome for enrichment activities and for teaching classrooms, but if they got bored they would find a way to entertain themselves. One particular time a raven decided to place some of its food right outside its cage enclosure to lure a peacock. Once the peacock got close and started to eat, the raven would sneak up and pluck the tail feathers off of the peacock. Ex-zookeeper here. Orangutans are super smart, super strong, and super jerks. Well, some are. We had a female who, if you were standing in front of her indoor enclosure, would spit and hit you in the mouth every dang time. And grin. She grinned so big when it happened. Lesson learned. I've been behind the scenes at a zoo once in my life. It was while they were feeding the monkeys, primates, whatever the proper term is. An orangutan with a mouthful of fruit looked at me, sighted in, and launched a golf ball sized wad of spit and chewed fruit at me. Hit me straight on the mouth. As gross as it was a heck of a shot. When I worked as a zookeeper intern, I think the biggest jerks were the emus. It was the summer of 2004 and the emus shared an exhibit with the wallabies. The exhibit wasn't high security. It was essentially a fence made of dried bamboo stalks. Wallabies are super cute, and while we didn't have an area where they are in the same space as visitors, some zoos do, wallabies are not typically threatening in any way. The emus were big jerks. They constantly pecked at the wallabies and were generally a pain. But they weren't separated because they didn't cause actual injuries. The wallabies eventually got their revenge and freedom. One night, one of the emus ran into the fence and sort of gently impaled itself. It wasn't badly injured, but it did fall down after the injury. What did the wallabies do? They kicked it in the head until it was dead. The wallabies and emus were separated the next day. Side note, zebras are jerks. 2. Our zebras shared an exhibit with the giraffes. We had a giraffe platform where visitors could feed the giraffes carrots, grain, and other goodies, according to the giraffe diet, of course. The zebras wanted the goodies and would kick the giraffes, so the giraffes would drop their food. Then the zebras would eat it. Eventually got their revenge and freedom. Yay. Kicked it in the head until it died. Oh. Not quite the same thing, but I volunteered at an aquarium while in high school. I later worked at another aquarium, but that's besides the point. I used to talk at different exhibits. The worst was beluga whales, at least it was for me. It's the first stop and lots of people come and I was just too anxious to go on mic in front of that many people. One of our whales was a young male. He interacted with the guests the most, often pushing his melon against the glass and blowing out water. There are videos of him with a mariachi band and at weddings during ceremonies. So yeah, a young male whale. Young male whales are excitable, if you catch my drift. Sometimes he would get so excited, he would rub himself on the biggest piece of glass. He only seemed to do this on the busiest days or days we had lots of kids. Normally I would talk about other stuff and people just kind of pointed and laughed. Some people would ask what was happening, to which I would reply, "Oh, you know how young guys are." People usually got it after that. One day, on a super busy day, the whale rubbed himself until climax. Whale CM for everyone to see. I was barely 16 at the time, and I was mortified when kids ran up to ask me what the explosion was. Whale just swims away, the smug bastard. I work with squirrel monkeys, and I go in there with a little bowl of live mealworms for training purposes. One day one particular monkey was being fairly grabby, reaching for my hair and whatnot. I had closed up their cage and was getting ready to leave when I noticed I hadn't slid a hatch shut. I moved closer to the fence to do it, and someone, I don't know who, but I'm betting it was the grabby one, shot a hand out of the cage, reaching for the mealworms, and knocked the bowl out of my hands. I don't know if you know this, but individual mealworms are hard to pick up off the floor, especially when they're crawling away as fast as their little legs can go. And so then of course all the monkeys are on the ground reaching through the fence to grab the worms while I'm trying to scoop them back into the bowl as fast as I can. That must have been the greatest thing ever. Like holy crap, free worms everywhere. I did also have a Capuchin monkey throw food at me. I ignored it because I was observing a different monkey at the time, and out of the corner of my eye I saw the one that I assumed threw the food come up to the fence and stick her arm under the door to try to reclaim the food she'd thrown at me, but it was out of her reach. Karma. Our local zoo used to have peacocks walking around freely. Those little suckers hated people, chased lots of small children before they got kicked out. Many zoos allow their peacocks to wander freely. I'm not sure why, but I've seen it at multiple zoos in the last few years. Swans are pure devil's spawn. They want to kill anything that moves near them. Sweet harmless baby ducks born on the pond initiate murder instinct. Man who feeds me and cleans my awful poop every day start up the murder protocol. Even the dumbest of invertebrates knew that we fed them and would be kinder. Swans see you bringing them food from across the park and are furious that you stole my food I never had and put it in that bucket you're bringing toward me, and I am going to beat the heck out of this groundhog near me because of it, and then try to murder you. Swans are the worst. Right now it's the short-tailed leaf-nosed fruit bat. I'm an intern in a well-known zoo. We have a wet cave filled with probably 1,000 of these suckers. The door is surrounded by a wire cage. When we go to feed them we just let the door open and let the bats fly in the cage. When we leave we have to herd them into the cave. As an intern I'm not allowed to touch them, so I put my hand up by them to guide them. Except they don't like that and they'll fly right in my face and hover there for a few minutes. One day I was by myself doing it and one of the little suckers would not get in the dang cave. I stood there for like 10 minutes doing jazz fingers and he just hung there. Butthole. I work with chimpanzees and I'll tell you, when the girls are in estrus, think of kind of being in heat for dogs. They are just downright mean to the males of their troops, sometimes even going as far as taking prize food items right out of the mouths of some of the lower ranking males. I've also seen fights between chimpanzees, which is completely normal as aggression is central to their social hierarchies, where the fight had finally died down and everyone was making up with one another as they usually do, until one of the females who wasn't done arguing handed one of the males a rock to throw at another female whom she was still mad at. This of course led to the fight starting all over again. Monkeys. Definitely the monkeys. They are cunning, fast and incredibly strong for their size, and they would find any opportunity to mess with you. Ironically, we had an enormous tiger that had been part of a circus, and while it weighed a couple of 100 pounds and could have killed you with just a swat of its paw, really just wanted to be petted. It was more likely you would be crushed when it pushed its head against you for a good scruffing. Have worked in various wildlife rehab research facilities, including a bird sanctuary where we did miss netting, setting up very fine nets between trees to catch songbirds, and banding of wild birds for research population counts. Handled everything from thrushes to woodpeckers to crows to sparrows, and the biggest jerks? Freaking chickadees. Most of the birds were scared or curious when we took them out of the nets. The chickadees were freaking pee. There was something bizarrely respectable about it. Here I am holding a bird smaller than the palm of my hand whose head I could crush with my freaking thumb, and it's going, "You may be bigger than me, but if you don't let me go I will rip your freaking cuticle off." On an aside, the woman who owned and ran one of the wildlife rehabs where I worked had rescued and cared for wolves, bears, lynx, mountain lions. The one animal that put her in the freaking hospital, a white-tailed deer, gored the crap out of her. 2. Same facility. Our female black bear loved rainy days. She'd wait until a school or tour group got up nice and close to her enclosure, then give the wet ground an almighty whack with her front paw. Sprayed the entire group with mud. She did it every damn time. In America, more people are attacked by white-tailed deer every year than mountain lions, bears, and wolves combined. I used to work on a boat that did marine wildlife and birding tours. Every spring when the orcas came north into our bay, they'd come up to the boat to check it out and say hi. They'd rub up against the boat and swim around. We let kids touch their fins. They were quite docile. The only animal we were ever attacked by was an Arctic tern. Terns are really small for seabads, but they are dongs. They are so aggressive because, for God knows why, they build their nests on the ground rather than in trees. There are trees around. They could use the nests to build trees in. But no, they'd rather just terrorize anyone who makes the mistake of coming near their nest. Foxes, weasels, people, bears, whatever. Terns will attack you. One day we were watching an Arctic tern chasing an eagle around at least a mile offshore. A tourist on our boat was trying to capture it with a telephoto lens, and the tern didn't like this guy's attitude, so it tried to peck a $2,000 lens to pieces. We had a cretin goat that was hand-reared, so it was put in the children's petting zoo. As it got older, it turned into more and more of a jerk. This goat started bullying the kids by gently approaching them until they was close enough to be pet. It would put its head against the kids and then try to push them over. But worse than that, is it really hated old ladies. It just straight up charged and rammed old ladies. After a few knockdowns, it became apparent what a jerk it was. We moved the goat to an off-exhibit 3/4 acre enclosure on a hillside. I was doing some work in the enclosure with a co-worker of mine before we found out about this particular goat. She stayed at the bottom of the hill to check out the animals while I was doing work up top. I looked down and she was hiding in the barn waving at me. I thought it was weird but just kept on working. Then, this goat comes up and starts pushing into me. I thought it was just being aggressive with wanting to be pet. Nope. Little crap was sure-footed on that hillside, planting it and trying to push me over. I slipped a few times, but it was more an annoyance at that point. What changed was when this goat started dropping his head in front of my thighs and jerking it up backwards, seemingly trying to impale me with its horn. I repeatedly had to grab its horn with one hand, while carrying my equipment in the other. Then it would scamper off and come back with another head push and attempted stabbing every 10 feet I made it down the hillside. When I met with my co-worker at the bottom, she told me it got aggressive and charged her. She was waving to try and warn me. After that we mentioned the goat to the keeper. He laughed and proceeded to tell us several stories about what a jerk this goat was. I'll always remember that goat. When I worked at Chester Zoo, I was always so uncomfortable being near the lion enclosure on my own, especially early in the morning. Once I had to get there at 6 AM and I was the only one around. Walked past the lions and couldn't see them, so I stepped a bit closer to try and get a better look. Suddenly the large male leapt up from just inside the fence where he had been obstructed by some tall plants and he roared deafeningly loudly in my face. I nearly pooed myself. Never went near them alone again. You have been visited by the Good Sleep Pizza. You will be blessed with cozy sleeps, but only if you upvote before going to sleep. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.